Thanks for your patience, everyone. Sorry for the little technical difficulty at the very beginning. I'm Peter Knutson. I'm an NTSB Media Relations Specialist. Chair Jennifer Homendy, that's Homendy, is here to take your questions on the NTSB investigation into the October 17th, 2019 PenAir Runway Overrun accident in Unalaska, Alaska. Also participating today is Sathya Silva, and that's Sathya Silva, and Sathya is the investigator in charge. To ask a question, select the question icon on the upper right hand of your screen. The icon is depicted with a question mark in a box. Type your question along with your name and media affiliation and submit it, and I will read the questions. The entire media briefing will be recorded and posted on YouTube later today. With that, I will turn it over to Chair Homendy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do see some questions that I believe Peter will go through. Just to mention, though, it's Dr. Silva if you end up quoting her.
So from Hope McKinney at KUCB in Unalaska, there seems to be a combination of factors that led to the crash. We spent the last 3 hours outlining a number of causes and safety recommendations to avoid future events like this. I know that there are no easy answers, but I'm going to ask, is there a concise, clear answer for how this crash could have been prevented?
The crash itself could have been prevented in a number of ways, but the most significant of which, Saab should have considered human error in their system safety assessment of the landing gear systems of the Saab 2000. Had they done that, they would have been able to predict that possibly there would be human error in overhaul of these systems. This was not something, this was a cross-wiring issue that the flight crew would not have known about and did not know about and could not know about prior to takeoff. And it was an issue that a mechanic would not know as well, but Saab and the overhauler, Saab in particular, should have known, and that should have been considered in their safety assessment. So that is the biggest issue with this accident. There are other factors as well. Certainly, the flight crew could have chosen to go on runway 31, and there could have been safety measures in place on the runway to deal with a longer landing of the Saab 2000, but that did not occur either. So I hope that's.
And the next question is from Alan Levin, Bloomberg. The overarching question I have is the large number of issues identified by investigators that contributed to the accident. Can you speak to what happens when so many problems occur simultaneously?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our role at the agency, is to really take a broad view and look in our investigations at any sort of contributing factors so that those are addressed. If we just took this as, an error by flight crew or a human error in the safety, the development of the landing gear systems, or in the safety assessments that did not consider human error, then, we wouldn't be doing our job. So we do have to consider everything that could have contributed to a crash. And those are the issues that we identified and issued recommendations on. And, there are a number of them, but we were able to synthesize those into some really good recommendations that hopefully FAA, EASA, and Saab will work on.
And the next question is Hope McKinney again from KUCB. The board has 10 safety recommendations. Will the various agencies and companies be able to implement those? What are the challenges in doing so? And do you anticipate any of the recommendations to be more difficult to implement than others?
Well,
go ahead.
Great question. I mean, certainly there will be challenges in implementing any recommendation, but we are very focused after the board meeting on working with safety partners to work towards implementation. And, you know, I'll just mention safety management systems, which I think is critical. We recommend that FAA require organizations that design, manufacture, and maintain aircraft to establish a safety management system. This is one recommendation which we've issued repeatedly, not in this area, but certainly when it comes to aircraft operations. On the operations side, 121, Part 135, Part 91. And so far, FAA, other than Part 121, has chosen to go with voluntary safety management systems. And yet we found in a number of accidents that had operators or in this case, a manufacturer had a effective safety management system, an accident could have been prevented. And so this is an issue that we continue to push FAA on, and we're going to continue to do that. Now, fortunately, in this area, legislation has been enacted that will push FAA to implement that recommendation and hopefully get that enacted in time. But there still remains other areas where SMS has to be implemented, and we continue to push. I mean, at the end of the board meeting, we stated this was, you know, the beginning of the work for the board in advocating for safety change. The only way we're going to prevent a future accident is by making sure these recommendations are implemented, and we'll do all we can to make sure that's done.
And from the same reporter, can you speak to the timeline on recommendations being implemented? How long do these sorts of things take?
It really depends. In this case, you know, two different ones. One or two may require rulemaking. There's one that says notify principal operations inspectors and frontline managers about the circumstances of this accident, and that's to the FAA. That's pretty easy. That's an advisory. And so it really is dependent. The one to Saab on redesigning the harness, the wire harnessing, that's already in process. So, you know, I would say the ones that require rulemaking will take longer. And then certainly FAA has some work to do on runway safety.
Okay, and Hope McKinney again. Are there any outstanding NTSB recommendations that the FAA has yet to implement that might have made this crash less likely? And it sounds like those are previously issued recommendations.
Yeah, none that I am aware of. Dr. Silva?
Yeah, in this case, we actually didn't reiterate any open recommendations. Everything that we found were newly issued recommendations per our proposed report.
Great. Okay. Next question, also from Hope McKinney. Another airline is in the process of coming to Unalaska. They're proposing using the Saab 2000 on our runway. Is that a smart move given what we learned about the aircraft landing on the short runway? Will they be prevented from doing so, and why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, we are not part of the decision making on whether they are approved or not approved for landing on that runway and operating at Dutch Harbor. And, you know, our role is in identifying safety deficiencies in this situation. The Saab 2000, the investigators found that the Saab 2000 could have landed safely had it not been for a braking system failure and an anti-skid system failure. But you have to have runways that are designed to address potential safety issues that will occur. And so our recommendation to the FAA is to consider that in their runway design criteria and in approval of operations at Dutch Harbor. Dr. Silva, I wasn't sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
Right, it's specific. Our recommendation is specific for the FAA to consider the runway safety area as in their approval of an airport for an operation, for an airline to operate to that specific airport. So in this case, our recommendation would go to the FAA and hopefully that would go into their consideration for this potential new operation into Dutch Harbor.
Yeah, and just to emphasize what you said, it's not our recommendation isn't just specific to the Saab 2000. It's
exactly
all carriers.
Yep.
What's the timeline, again from Hope McKinney, what's the timeline and process for taking the crashed Saab airplane off Unalaska's runway where it has been sitting for about 2 years?
Dr. Silva?
We'll have to get back to you on that one.
Is it correct to say that this is the conclusion of the investigation into the Saab 2000 crash? But that the NTSB's work will continue. What are the next steps?
Yes, absolutely. So now we'll go through the process of finalizing the report. The investigation's completed. We'll finalize the report, and the final report will be posted on our website for public view. And then after today, our safety recommendations and communications team will take all the safety recommendations and formally issue them with a letter from me to each of the recipients explaining what we found and what recommendations we would like them to implement and why. And then there will be discussions back and forth, and there are periodically, for example, with FAA and others, urging them to implement our recommendations. So at that point, there's a lot of communication going back and forth to see if and when people or the recipients will implement our recommendations.
From Alan Levin, technical question. There was a lot of talk about various landing scenarios, but I didn't hear one addressed. Would the plane have been able to stop with normal brake action if there had been a 24-knot tailwind?
So go ahead, Dr. Silva.
Yeah, we did run a number of calculations and scenarios. In this case, the 24-knot tailwind was not explicitly tested, given that that was not the condition that the aircraft experienced on touchdown. And again, those winds do change from aloft to when they get closer to the ground. So yeah. We did not do an explicit calculation for that number in particular.
And Alan, just to add to that, so what the pilots heard on landing was 24 knots, which was accurate up about how far up? I forgot what you told me, Dr. Silva.
It's 30 feet.
30 feet off the runway. So what they heard on land before they landed was 24 knots, which exceeded the performance of the aircraft. On landing, when it touched down, it was 15 knots. So when the aircraft performance study was completed, and our team actually went to Sweden and worked with Saab, when the aircraft performance study was completed, the scenarios they looked at didn't exceed 15 knots. They were looking at 15 knots because that's what it was when the aircraft landed. But the flight crew was given the weather information that they had going in. Obviously, they wouldn't have what it is on touchdown.
Okay, and that completes all the, those are all the questions that came in. So this will conclude today's media briefing, or media availability, I should say. A recording of this availability will be available on our YouTube channel, which is NTSB Gov, later today. Any follow-up questions can be directed to NTSB Media Relations at ntsb.gov, or you can reach us by phone at 202-314-6100. Thank you for participating, and good afternoon.